Okay, well, thank you for the nice introduction, and thank you all for being here. I'm watching all of these people come in this really nice venue, and I'm getting nervous. So this is good. And I have to pick the question. That makes me even more nervous. But thank you all for coming. I'm fighting. I taught a class all day today, and I'm having a little bit of jet lag. So once I get going, it won't be so awkward for me. So please bear with me for a moment. So I have two topics to discuss with you this evening, and I hope that they're interesting for you. And I would love your feedback as I've been sort of piloting these topics and doing a lot of writing and exploring them. And the first topic is about impediments, and the second topic is about a concept called fail agility. So I'm really excited to talk with you, and again, really looking forward to your feedback. And it's wonderful to be here. Thanks for Sigma, and thanks to you all for joining us this evening. So that's a little bit about me by the numbers. As was mentioned, I was number 67 Scrum Master, and there's something like 800, 900,000 now. I lost count. But I started doing Scrum back in 2003. And have been in the Agile space ever since. It took me a while to warm up to it, but once I did, I never looked back. So I've been all over the world training, and I've written a couple of books, and it's been a lot of fun. And when I'm not teaching or training or coaching Agile teams, I'm usually in a smelly barn with smelly animals, and I love every minute of it. So it's really wonderful. It keeps me grounded. So that's a little bit about me. Literally hundreds of teams by now and thousands of impediments, which is why we're here for the first talk. So I want to explore this concept of impediment. Now, the name of this presentation, Removing or Unclogging Organizations of Nasty Impediments, somebody asked me for a last-minute title for this presentation. It wasn't Sigma. It was the previous time I did this. And I remembered that I was having some plumbing problems in my house. And then I realized what a perfect title for impediments, because we really want to get rid of them and clear the pipes so that we can be agile organizations. How many of you guys are running some form of agile, like Scrum or Kanban? Okay. How many of you have achieved agility? Okay, that's the other follow-up to the question that's a little more difficult to answer. So what does that look like, and how do we get there and into to this nirvana, so to speak, of agility? So that's what I want to talk about. And what happens to us all when we start focusing a team or teams on delivering value quickly, we notice that many things get in the way of doing so. Not only in the way of delivering that value, but get in the way of getting feedback about what we've delivered. It isn't as easy as it should be. And maybe our organizations aren't structured properly for it, or maybe the mindset is different, or the culture's different, and a host of other issues. So it's a very interesting dilemma. And an impediment, this is my definition. I don't know if it's the correct Wikipedia or dictionary definition, but basically in terms of agility, impediments are anything that block, suspend, slow down, obscure the delivery of value and or feedback regarding that business value. So an organization's health depends upon its ability to remove impediments. Now we all know that. How many of you have gone to Scrum Master class? Certified Scrum Masters? Okay, so you heard all about impediments, and if you haven't, you probably still have heard about impediments. It's important. And yet it's really difficult to identify them. It's my story's blocked. That's an easy impediment. But what about other sort of hidden impediments, impediments beneath the surface that slow us down individually or as teams, organizations? We'll get into that. It's not as easy as it sounds, but everybody's like, yeah, fight those impediments. And we go, okay, what does that mean exactly? So that's why we're here. Mike Beadle, who is one of the signers of the Agile Manifesto, unfortunately recently passed, left us with this wonderful gift over the last few years called this concept of business agility. Now, it's not a new concept. Mike didn't think of it himself, but what he did was give us a nice definition of what we should be striving for as we implement agile methods and agile thinking. It's definitely about the teams, it's about the people, it's about collaboration, it's about delivering value, it's about responding to change, but why? Invariably, we want to have organizations that are healthy and that are agile, nimble, are able to pivot in response to what's happening in the world. Otherwise, we may not have a healthy business. There's a statistic recently within the last year or two that says 75% of today's Standard & Poor trading index will not exist by the year 2030. Those companies will be replaced. They will be disrupted. The average corporate lifespan has gone from 65 years to 35 years, now encroaching upon 15 years. When will it have again? So we can't afford to not pivot. We can't afford to just, play it safe. It's all about thriving and having a healthy business. So business agility is something that when we do Scrum or we have Kanban teams or what have you, we're trying to create this ecosystem that we can adapt and pivot and be nimble. It's imperative to business health. And yes, the people are important and the value is important. All of that stuff too. That's how we get there. Okay, so business is only as healthy as its people. It can only pivot as well as its people can. So when we think about impediments, if we just take this basic statement, this gift that Mike Beadle gave us, and we look at these keywords, ability, adapt quickly and effectively, all forms of change, deliver maximum value and customer experience, those are loaded words. Underneath each one of those topics could be months or years of research and investigation and data and understanding how well we're doing on quickly and maximizing customer value, et cetera. And so when we think about finding impediments, we can start here. Are we able to deliver value with little drag or resistance or friction? The least friction we have, the easier we can get things out to market, the faster we can get feedback. And what about feedback? Are we able to adapt quickly? Or does feedback sit in a bunch of surveys on SurveyMonkey or in our MailChimp results and we just let it sit there because we're too busy doing other things? Okay. What about the sources of change? Where are those pressure points coming from? Is it competition? Is it trying to be first to market? Is it change within our own organizations because we're growing so fast? Or perhaps we've reached some inertia and maybe we're having some employee attrition, trying to figure out why those reasons might be. So we can't afford to turn a deaf ear to the things and entities and situations that we may need to respond to and taking a really objective look at those issues. This is hard to do. It's like looking at yourself every morning in the mirror after a really long night of drinking. Okay, it's tough. It's not easy. It's exposing all of our wrinkles and ugliness, but it's imperative that we do so. And doing that in a way that's not about emotion or about feeling challenged or criticized, but just it's data. And good data is great, and bad data is also great. We need to take that in so we can adapt accordingly. Being objective is important and it's difficult. I understand that. What does value mean? Is the customer satisfied? And then how do we get better at answering these questions? So what's our retrospective on the retrospective, if you will? What's our means of determining the answers to these questions, and are they useful and valid means that may change over time? Okay. So when we think about why it's important to identify and resolve impediments, so I8N is from now, this point forward, the international abbreviation for impediment. Okay, so if you're in a hurry, it's I8N. Anybody ever done internationalization, I18N? Yeah, okay, so that's where I can't make up anything myself. So I also drew it here, but the basic idea is that we have an idea, we need to deliver so that we can get feedback, the feedback of which empowers and informs our next delivery. So it's this vicious cycle, if you will. It's this wonderful cycle that we need to really tightly couple and be able to deliver and get feedback at a pace that makes sense for ourselves as technology folks, for our customers, our user landscape, what have you, other stakeholders. So what happens then is as we start to deliver, and who moved from a traditional organization into Scrum or some sort of Agile? Who's making that journey? Okay, so you guys will appreciate this. As you move from the traditional landscape into something that's more value-based and quick-paced based, if you will, what we discover are a bunch of constraints and impediments that get in the way of just delivering. It's easy to just deliver it, but it's not that easy. So what happened, even in new organizations, this happens as well. So we encounter these impediments, which are sort of like cholesterol in the veins of business agility. Anything that impedes our ability to deliver and get meaningful, timely feedback is a business problem. It's not a personal problem. It's nothing to be emotionally attached to. It's just something we need to figure out. So what happened, I was on an airplane. As you do on airplanes, you get really bored, okay, and I can't sleep on airplanes. So I started thinking about all of the impediments that I routinely hear from clients. And I made this animation just for the fun of it. I see how many impediments can I fill up a slide with? And sadly enough, they came so quickly. These are impediments I hear. Maybe you recognize some of these. Right? Impediments I hear all the time, and especially the larger the organization, right? The more the impediments scale, so to speak. But smaller organizations have a lot of impediments as well. Sometimes it's finding time to do anything. And we just keep going and going and going and going. Okay? You recognize any of these? Yeah, of course. All right. So, and sadly enough, there are patterns across all organizations that, we're getting better at fixing, but often they fall by the wayside because we have the real work to do. Well, this is just as much a real work as is product delivery, isn't it? Because this is what impedes delivery. So the worst case impediment is when we have all of these issues and challenges, and it's not a criticism of anybody, it's just the way our systems go sometimes. Sometimes we have system errors, okay? But what happens if we don't pay attention to fixing the issues and to at least improving the situation, we have the worst impediment of all. Okay? The retrospectives stop happening, or the team says, we just need 5 minutes. A simple pluses and deltas will do, and off we go. Everything is good enough. Groupthink. We fall into groupthink. We might even fall into a state of learned helplessness, which I'll come back to in just a moment. So where might we see impediments? There are many opportunities for these little guys to pop up, and I wish that's how cute they look. They're really not that cute and adorable. We might hear about them in the daily Scrum. My story's blocked. I can't access an environment. Okay, that's actually a pretty simple impediment, relatively speaking. Retrospectives, of course. Any interaction. Social media. I shouldn't have done this, but I ran into an issue at Starbucks at a US airport. The people didn't have anything they needed to be productive. They didn't have any more baked goods, and I was really hungry. I probably should stop eating those. They didn't have the ability to give refunds, and all of the orders were taking 20 minutes to process, which for Starbucks is a really long time. It's a long time for anywhere, okay, especially when you're in an airport with a plane to catch. So people were leaving their orders at the counter because they were about to miss their flight. So they were giving away this food that was available after the people had already given up and walked out, and they couldn't get a refund for it. So I tweeted the hosting service that hosts that Starbucks, and I said, hey, these people have some major impediments. Could you send them some help? I wasn't complaining about the people, I was complaining about the system. So social media can actually be a fine area to scrape for impediments or issues. At least I think the people got the help. They actually replied to me, which I was happy to see, but help these people out. They can't deliver, and they can't make the customers happy. That's a problem, okay? Reputation is everything these days, isn't it? So we look at impediments revealing themselves in other moments of trust. When you start to trust somebody, or a coach comes in, or a Scrum Master's really been helpful for you, or your manager. Sometimes it's when anger and sadness outweighs the trust. I don't care if I trust you or not. I'm so upset, I'm just going to tell you whatever's coming to my mind. And that thing, whatever's coming to my mind, is really impeding me. Hopefully someone's listening to that. During observations or listening, or sometimes simply coincidence, being in the right place at the right time. So as a Scrum Master and a coach, I always consider myself a Scrum Master. I carry around a notebook, and as I'm listening to conversations, my brain automatically goes to, what's the challenge here? Okay, so sometimes knowing the impediment before the people know the impediment. That's a skill that you can absolutely develop. So an attentive coach seeks these opportunities. And I found that over the years, impediments fall into many categories. Now, this was a 5-minute sort of brain dump, if you will, about different impediment categories. There may be more. I may be able to consolidate a few. But the impediments that we typically encounter are the ones above the line, or the ones that we see readily. We see operational, we see what impedes value delivery. We certainly have dependencies, especially if we're outsourced or distributed teams. We may have impediments in the managerial or leadership space. I get called all the time to do leadership workshops because the team says, oh, our managers don't know anything about agility. Okay, so that happens. But then beneath that, other kinds of impediments, social impediments, psychological impediments. People having a bad day at work or a bad year at work, it happens, or maybe other things going on in their lives. Cultural, we've always done it this way. Maybe there's a strong safety bias at an organization that prevents them from trying anything new, or they will only try it if it's within their box of something that they know. They're really afraid. And perhaps that fear comes from people being laid off 5 years ago when some project didn't go well. That stays with people. Those stories spread faster than anything. Okay, so it's really interesting to think about the types of impediments. Sometimes it's simply from lack of asking for help. So things go along and nobody asks for help, and someone's blocked and someone's stuck, and there's no breakthrough of learning. I was in Australia last year to speak at the Scrum Australia conference, actually on this topic, at the next topic, and I spent a few days there, and I went to go fishing. So I was really excited. I paid the reservation for the fishing boat, and I get there at 6:30 in the morning. When I get there, 7 guys show up. So it's some kind of bachelor party or something, and they're all ready to go fishing, and they looked at me, and they looked around, they said, "Are you here to go fishing too?" I was like, "Yeah, sorry." So they're like, "Oh," you know. So anyway, there was a girl on the boat, and so we go to fish, and the guy who's running the fishing boat, he says, "Everybody knows how to fish, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure," because I didn't want to be the only one who needed help. So we go out, we're on the Great Barrier Reef. It was amazing and beautiful, and what an experience. And so we're throw the bait out. Of course, I had to bait my own hook because that's the strong girl thing to do. So I bait my own hook. It's terrible. Threw it out there, and I noticed that every so often something would bite my line. Well, all the guys are catching fish after fish, beautiful fish, evidently very tasty fish, and I'm catching air. All right, so I keep pulling up the rod, and clearly something's taken the bait, but I had no idea how to fish the Great Barrier Reef. I'd only fished in Texas before. Big difference, very big difference. So basically, finally, 30 minutes before we're ready to pull up the anchor and go in, the guy walks over, he goes, "Would you like some help?" And I said, "Yes, I really want to catch a fish." So he gave me help, and within 2 minutes, I caught 2 fish. I caught some kind of, I forgot the name of one, but the other one was an Indonesian red. Okay, actually beautiful and very tasty. I cooked it and ate it that night, so I did take from the earth and put it to good use. But an interesting story about that fish. So I asked for help, I caught the fish. Turns out this fish, ironically, is not native to Australia. It came over from Indonesia on the boats and is actually a predator on the reef. It's killing the native fish. So I caught an impediment. See what happens when you ask for help.